everyone. Hey there. Hope you guys are doing well today. We are from Community Home Education Center. I'm Jeannie.
I'm Cindy.
And we're so glad that you joined us this afternoon.
You think they're going to be able to tell we're in swivel chairs today? We're both like, excuse us, we're in swivel chairs today. And who doesn't love a good swivel chair?
I love swivel chairs.
So just rock with us today.
Well, it's a rockin' topic, right?
It is a rockin' topic.
Yes, we're going to talk about today, of all things, homeschooling.
And why?
And why?
Why homeschool?
Yes.
Right? Why do this? Seems like more work, seems harder, seems like taking on extra responsibilities. Why on earth homeschool?
The end.
Hope you enjoyed our talk. We're not sure either. So there you go. Yep.
Okay, now for real though.
We really don't know, but we have learned some things.
We have,
Yes.
and some of the reasons why. So, okay, so you're newer to this game than I am. Tell me why you started homeschooling.
Okay, so I tried, well, first I'd like to say, I think it's only fair to say that this was laid on my heart by God.
Okay.
And for your non-Christians out there, I wasn't raised to talk in Christianese, so it really annoys me because I used to be like, what does that mean? Or like God spoke to them, or they'd be like, he laid it on my heart. I'm like, how does he do that? So, to break that down a little bit, just getting those still small voices when my first was born, and I didn't know anyone, of that like, oh, homeschool. I remember, oh gosh, the only book I could find on it was that Facts of Life chick. You remember from Facts of Life?
Yeah. Lisa Welchel.
Okay, I bought her book. It was the only one I could find. So let's say first thing was God, but then I was like we all sometimes do when God lays something on our heart to speak Christianese. I was like, blah, 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 because I was raised in a fancy private school and then public school for high school, and that was just not going to be the route for my kids. I didn't know anyone that did it. I had all these preconceived notions about it. So then I sent to private school, and then I did public school, and then homeschooled. So my original reason was God, and then afterwards, I think with those two experiences, it changed because I learned some things that, one, I thought, okay, so I thought the value of what I was getting for what I was paying at private school wasn't there.
Okay, no,
and I
it's
knew,
totally valid.
Okay, so I knew at some point I was going to be trading my time for more money to pay for the private school.
Mm-hmm.
And then since I was still having smaller children, I didn't want to spend time away from them.
Right.
So I was like, to trade more of my time for money to then outsource having my babies to send my first, it didn't make sense to me.
Okay.
So then I tried a public school, which was a great public school dual language program, and my child learned a lot, and I have mostly good things to say about it. But then still having those two smaller children, I spent round trip for pick up and drop off in the day. I spent 2.5 hours in the car.
Wow.
That's not including the days that there was like an evening something.
Wow.
And 2.5 hours in the car in high traffic hours, because that's what it is in car line, doesn't make me a friendly person.
Yeah.
So I find myself coming home and being short, just not nice to be around. And then I also found this child, how different children require different amounts of sleep. My firstborn, I didn't know it at the time, but she requires a lot of sleep. So by Thursday or Friday, she was unrecognizable, just nasty. My husband would be like, what's wrong with her? I'm like, just don't talk to her until Saturday. I'll send food in the room and don't make eye contact. And she's a really sweet child, but by Thursday or Friday, she was spent. So I think those experiences, and then I was like, okay, we're doing this. And then at that point, it was still like, we're just trying this year by year because I'm not like these people. And then a couple years into it, I'm like, oh, I totally like these people.
So much more, though.
I'm so much more.
So much more.
But I went the very, very judgmental route to homeschooling.
Perfect.
Like, I judged her family actually really great because when I first met her, she had just had her 6th kid. And some of the kids maybe had shoes on, some didn't, and I thought that's appalling. I didn't ever think I'd be like the family with the matching clothes, the hair. That wasn't going to be me, like always but shoes, I was like, my kids will wear shoes. But then my kids, like, I've definitely shown up places and they're not wearing shoes. The younger ones,
Yeah, I feel like that's a bad rap that homeschooling gets, but I just feel like that's me. If my kids went to public school or private school, they still would show up probably a third of the time without shoes.
Well, now I think, because I didn't think that was me, but I think in homeschooling, they're just not wearing shoes a lot. And we're in Florida. We don't require them to wear shoes playing outside. So then it just sometimes happens that you're like load up in the car and the small one, you get there and you're like, oh crap. So
shoes,
yes. Okay. So I went the judgmental, never going to do it. You all are weird. Not for me. I am career driven all the way to homeschooling. What about you?
Oh, Okay, well, I started homeschooling. My oldest is 18. And she's going to be 19 in a couple months. So she just finished her first year of college.
Yay.
I know. She loved it. It was a little different for her, but she loved it. So I guess I've been doing it like 14 years now.
Wow.
We started right from kindergarten. I mean, I'm one of those who's like, I really homeschooled for all 19 years.
Right.
Because we all homeschool at the beginning. I mean, we're teaching them to talk. We're teaching them to, potty train and tie their shoes. There's a lot of stuff we're teaching.
That's true. Mm-hmm.
So.
Absolutely.
But did we start, with the school district? Not until, she joined kindergarten. So one of the reasons why I did it, and it was very similar to what you said, with just feeling really called towards it. And
that's Christianese.
I was just going to say, when I said called towards it, I started thinking about it all the time. And I didn't have anybody else that I knew that was homeschooling at
That's
the time.
a great way to translate the whole God laid it on my heart call to, is when you're just thinking about all, you can't get it out of your head.
Yes.
This need to check into this.
Right.
Yes.
And I didn't have none of my family, none of my friends. I don't even think at the time when we were in a pretty big church, I don't think I even knew anybody at church that was homeschooling. So I really felt all the time I was thinking about it. And as she approached 3 and 4 and she attended VPK, and I was still thinking about homeschooling. So I did what I do, and I went to the library and just checked out every single book that I could get on homeschooling.
Which right then you should have known, like, homeschooler.
This is it.
This is what you do. She went and spent 6 hours at the library.
I did, and I went through and I started reading, and I was like, I think this is really doable. And I think one of the things that at first that I was like, this is just a terrible idea, was that schools, at least where we are in Florida, in elementary school, they go 8 to 2.
They do.
So even as a kindergartner, you go there and you're there from 8 to 2. And I just thought, I had at that point 2 smaller children, and I just thought, I can't possibly do 6 hours of teaching a day. Like, I don't know how this works.
Right.
And
because I know a lot of states still have half-day kindergartens.
They do,
which is nice.
And I think
our
maybe
state doesn't.
Exactly, or even if it had been every other day or something,
or optional, or
right, because it's still 5 days a week also. So
right.
you're talking 30 hours a week. In my head, I was thinking that's like almost a full-time job, and I still have to be home with these other kids. How am I going to do this? So when I went and I read all these things, and I was like, oh, people weren't spending that much time in homeschool. And so as I read what they were actually doing, at the very beginning, it was like maybe an hour a day.
For your kindergartner.
Yeah.
Right.
For your kindergartner. And so that was and it didn't have to be a solid hour from like 8 to 9.
Absolutely.
It could be in 15-minute chunks here, and it actually worked better in 15-minute chunks here and 15-minute chunks there, and lots of play and lots of cooking together and being outside and lots of playing with their siblings and things like that. And then, so that was really when I realized, oh, okay, this is a possibility.
I could do this.
Yeah.
Once you realize the hours weren't exactly what it was at school.
Right.
And that's not taking away anything from what teachers are doing at school in those 6 or 7 hours, but it's taking away the in-between times.
Yes.
The classroom times.
The admin times.
The admin times.
Yep.
And then also think, like, let's say they're doing a craft or they're going to art class. That might happen on Tuesday night at your house.
Right.
It's not like you're like, oh, okay, we're going right from math to this. So it's like your core, you're sitting around, and then the rest happens at other times.
Yes, and going to the zoo or field trips, just things like that. At school takes different amounts of time, and with us was just less time. And as we've gotten more into middle school and high school and even upper elementary school, yes, we spend more than an hour a day on school.
Jeanne is very diligent, and I would say she's such a good marker in how much time to spend, because you're frankly on the very conservative side of how much time you spend. Let's call it desk time.
Okay.
For school. You're doing 5 kids at a time about, usually.
Right.
So you have that, you have volume, but you're spending now, so if you say a kindergartner takes an hour a day, I'm thinking like mine, I'm even doing a little bit less, because Jeanne really, her bar is set very high. Seat work, and your younger ones seem to fall into place because your older ones are doing seat work, so they're excited to do it.
They are, yes. I've never had the issue where somebody doesn't want to sit and do it. I mean, not, all year long. Yes, there's days where somebody's like, I don't feel like doing this today. But just because we started and it was like, and they've had that pattern. It'd be like a kid saying, I don't want to eat breakfast.
Right.
If that's what you do every morning, it's
eventually they're going to give up.
Right.
Or eat breakfast.
Or eat breakfast, or just not even realize that saying no is a choice.
Yes, that's true.
That's true. It's not a choice. So, so in middle school, high school, I'd say we probably 4 to 6 hours a day. So that's more about the time that they would be in school, but you have to realize too that that's their homework too.
Oh yes, no, okay, that's such a huge misconception. Is homeschoolers, we protect our nighttime.
Right.
We are not doing work at night unless we did a field trip day or took the day off. Then maybe I'm sitting at 8:30 and doing math with one of the kids. But other than that, that's done.
Yes.
You're done. And you're very good at starting at 8 a.m. about,
Right.
and finishing up their day. I spread it out a little bit more based on when I'm working. But yeah, there's no homework.
Right.
There's no homework. So you're saving that time. So when I
Yes.
had my kids in school and I'm doing 2.5 hours a day in the car, 5 times a week, minimum, and then coming home even in first grade and having, maybe 20 minutes of homework a night.
I was going to ask you that.
Yeah, about 20
Yeah.
minutes. And that was in first grade. But still, they're not in the mood. They get home. So I know that sometimes school moms think, oh, I could never do that. And I'm telling you, you are spending more time in the car.
Right.
Or organizing the backpack, or did you send back this slip or this, and staying on top of all do they have their 100 days of school shirt all worked? I mean, you're spending just as much time doing that as I really think you'd spend homeschooling.
Yes. And one of the reasons a reason that we homeschooled was never to avoid public school. We weren't afraid of it.
Mm-hmm.
Private school would have been an option had we probably had more money and again, like I said, I just couldn't understand the 6 hours a day, 5 days a week thing.
So young, right.
Right, so young. But I've definitely had friends and other homeschoolers have told us, the thing when you send your kid to school and then you come home and they have to do homework, and you're really getting the worst parts of it.
Oh my gosh. Oh, you are.
Which is what you said.
I don't even know if they know, if you're sending your kid to school, I don't even know if you know how great your kid is. Because there was times that I was like, I got a DVD player in the car because I was like, the less talking, the better. Let's just, the minute I pick her from school, I don't care if it's 5 minutes at the grocery store, headphones on, and because they're so tired, especially before they build up stamina. I can see now in late elementary, they start to build up stamina.
Yes.
But when they first start, guys, that's not your child. They're mentally so stimulated all day, and not in a bad way. It'd be like us attending, it's like when we attend the homeschool conferences. You're on all day.
Right.
You're focusing, you're thinking, okay, I need to get something to eat, I need to go to the bathroom, I need to hold it, I need to this. And that's just not happening at home.
Yeah.
Right? You're not holding your pee at home.
Right. Well, and because we're older and more cognizant, we know we chose to do this.
Right.
And we're doing this, and we know why we're doing this. We know it's short term.
Yes.
But for these 5-year-olds going,
right,
they don't understand
they
that.
don't understand.
Their bodies are tired.
So tired.
Yeah, and that's one of the reasons that it's not a reason why we started homeschooling, obviously, but it's a reason why I thought that it's really beneficial is because we can let everybody have a good sleep schedule.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes.
So,
and sleep is so important. There's just books after books after books that say that, the correlation with sleep and brain development is so huge.
Right.
So allowing them to, do that in their own time, and each child is so different.
They are, yes.
So I think that as I've homeschooled now a few years, my reasons for homeschooling now have changed from what they did in the beginning.
Okay, so you had that thought about I should homeschool.
Yes.
So now what do you think?
Okay, so now I would consider myself a lifer.
Okay.
Because what I've realized now is that we're all homeschoolers. We all homeschool. Now when I think about homeschooling, I used to think that was me sitting around the table like the late 1800s, taking out your arithmetic book. Now I realize that, no.
Chalk.
Yes, everyone take out your chalk tablet and we're going to practice our loop-de-loops for cursive.
Yes.
Now I realize homeschooling just means I'm in charge of my children's education.
Right.
I'm in charge. And that means that what we outsource, which we do outsource, I'm in charge of outsourcing. I pick who, I pick what, I pick when, I pick the schedule, I choose it all. And now I think that I see myself as a different kind of homeschooler now. Now I see myself as what maybe we all parents were 40, 50 years ago. I'm in charge of my child's education.
So empowered almost?
Yes. Oh my goodness. So if you're a mom and you're sending your kid to a public school or private school, I don't care. You homeschool.
Right.
You are in charge of your child's education, not the teacher, not the principal, not anyone. You are in charge. You are in charge of your child. You're in charge of what they're good at, what they're not good at. No one knows them better than you. And frankly, I think every teacher out there would be like, yes, please. You are in charge of their education. I have lots of friends in education, and they're desperate for parents to step back up. The teacher is not the end all be all. So I think that once you assume that, I would implore every parent out there, dad and mom, take back the responsibility of your child's education. I don't think the expectation was ever that you sent a child to school 6 days a week and then all set.
Right.
You were still making sure they were getting it in the summer, doing things that used to be the norm, sitting down and practicing math drills with your dad at night. I don't know where the shift happened that we stopped thinking this was our responsibility, but it's not. My parents sent us to a wonderful private school, but my brother slipped through the cracks in that education style. And my brother is a very smart guy, raising 4 kids and doing a great job, but He needed to be homeschooled, and not in the sense of like sitting home all day.
Right.
He needed someone advocating for him and saying, I don't fit in this box.
Right.
And that's okay. And that's what we need to start doing for our
Yes.
children. And I just think that schools make it harder to do that.
Okay.
To say, I'm advocating for my child. You know, I had a friend that last year tried to hold her first grader back in school, Center K and 1, struggled all first grade. She met up with the uppers in the school and kept going up, and they refused to let her hold her first grader back until third grade. So this mom pulled her out and homeschooled her. So, because she knew her child.
Right.
She's not ready to go on. Math is not one size fits all. Reading is not one size fits all. So take back your child's education. I don't even want to say I'm some like pro homeschooler, don't send your kids to school. I think schools are great, but parents, step back in.
Right.
You are ultimately in charge. You're in charge of all of this. You're in charge of, hey, what are you reading? You know, what math style are you learning? You know, are you doing your math homework? You know, I look at my children at different math levels. I mean, different chronological math levels.
Mm-hmm.
And I see that I used to think that mattered, but now I see that math is just like reading. Things click at different ages.
Mm-hmm.
So rip off the front cover of that math book and put your kid at the math level they're at.
Absolutely.
Up,
Yes.
the same, over,
Right.
it doesn't matter. It's so ridiculous.
Well, that's another thing honestly, with homeschooled kids, for the most part, if you don't make it a big deal about, look at you, you're in this math, or look at you, you're in this math, a lot of times they don't know either.
They don't know. And nor should they.
No.
So I have one that's above grade level at everything. And I really don't even like to say that because that's just how
Right.
God made her. So sometimes she'll be like, well, I'm advanced. And I'm like, no, you're not advanced.
You're who you are.
You are who you are.
Yes.
And if the work is challenging you, if it's rigorous, and if you're giving it your best, that's exactly where
Mhm.
you're supposed to be. Because I can see how let's call it a in-the-box child that's smart and fits the school system box, well, then you're just going to breed pride in them. And pride in an adult is ugly.
Yeah.
That's an ugly attribute in an adult. So our education system for the poor kid that does fit the perfect box can breed pride that they can think like, oh, look who I am.
By the way, I graduated number 3 in my high school class of 550.
By the way, I think the only reason I graduated is because my mom volunteered at the school, and my English teacher came up and said, you know, I wouldn't even pass you, but your mom spent so much time here volunteering, I'd feel terrible. So there you go, right?
Number 3 means nothing, you realize, right?
Or number like, I don't think I actually graduated. I'm not tattling on her because I can't remember her name, but I pretty much, she fudged my grade so I could walk. So I'm not tattling on her either, but the point is, it didn't matter.
It didn't matter.
So we're putting this off on our kids. So take back your education. You are all homeschoolers in some sense. And if you choose to keep your kid at home, you can outsource whatever you want. There's so many resources there.
There are.
So the pressure of like, well, I can't teach them.
Right. Don't have that pressure.
Don't have
Just
that.
take it off.
Don't have that because last year I hired someone to help me, you know, 1 day a week for about 4 or 5 hours, and they homeschooled both my kids for 4 or 5 hours. You know, so don't take off that you can outsource.
They tutored her kids.
They tutored him. You know, I provided the subjects and the material, and
Right.
they tutored them.
Yes.
There are so many options. This is not about you sitting around the table and learning 7 different subjects every year. That's not what homeschooling is.
Right. And it can
Unless
be.
you want it to
exactly.
be.
It can
Unless
be.
you want it to be.
Here's the thing. I just think you need to speak about something you're a little more passionate about.
Okay, I know, because I'm like, my armpits are sweating. I'm like, you know.
I want some passion in our
I
speech
know,
here.
I
Well,
know.
no, what you were saying about, you know, whether your kids are going to public school, whether they're going to private school, really you're in charge of their education.
Yes.
And what I think is amazing about that is there's a lot of stories. So there might be some people who, you know, they have to send their kids to school so that they can work. And they can't afford to stay home, and maybe they're single parents.
Right.
And they just, well, here's the thing. You're still in charge
You're
that.
still in charge.
Yes. Reading to your kids. You know, following up with them, showing interest in them. That was a
Yes.
big thing. I felt like my parents didn't show a lot of interest in me.
Mhm.
You know, so yes, I was very bright, but I didn't feel like my parents were interested in anything that I did.
Right.
And I think that just showing that interest would have been such an amazing boost to me.
Yes.
Be like, what are you learning? Oh, you know, it's something that I love about homeschooling. So maybe this wasn't necessarily like a reason why I did it, but now what I see that I love it is that I love to learn.
Oh my gosh.
So I love being with the kids and learning new
Yes,
things.
I know.
And people would say every so often to me, like, "Oh, I couldn't teach on that book because that book was so boring, and my kids wouldn't listen to it." And I was like, "No, I think if it's you that was boring."
Right. Oh, I know.
Because yes, the book is the book, and it might be dry, but if you're interested in what's going
I
on,
know.
I mean, I think it's just contagious. And so I
It
found
is.
that with them, I get so excited when
Yes.
they learn to read, and talked about it clicking.
Clicking.
When it clicks, it was almost I don't know, addicting.
It is.
I love to see
and
the wheels turn.
Yes, and rereading some of these books or learning anything. Okay, so a misconception I had about homeschooling was that I used to think I was the teacher, and now I've realized I'm more the coach.
Right.
Right. So I think when parents think, oh, I can't homeschool, I couldn't be the teacher. Now I realize, like, well, I'm not really the teacher. I mean, I choose the curriculum.
Right.
So I vet that, but I'm really the coach.
You didn't write it.
Right. The curriculum is lined up to walk you through it. I'm the coach. I'm there to make sure they're learning time management, discipline, sit there. If they can't figure it out. But I used to think I had to know, that whole, like, you just have to be a week ahead of them. That's totally not true. Sometimes I'm like, they're like, how do you do this? I'm like, I have no clue. Like, let's just figure it out together. And they don't judge me.
No.
They're not like, well, I'm not going to learn from you because you don't know. Even in our homeschool group, there's sometimes I'm teaching that they ask me something and I'm like, well, I don't know. Let's find out together. And they're never like, we're not coming back next week. Clearly, you're not the expert. Because I think the more you know you don't know.
Yes.
So it actually is a sign of like, let's do this together.
Yes.
Another reason to homeschool that I've now become a lifer is because I feel like my family does life together now. And without this environment, it wouldn't happen. And I feel like they get to see me for who I am, good, bad, and ugly. And that's important to me because I have just one gender. I'm raising all girls. And I want them to know that what this is like.
Yeah.
I want them, if God should be in their plans, to have families. And I want them to know that this is what it is. So one time I was having this serious conversation with my oldest about character. And about who she should be and why, and she's telling me all these things, and I'm having this, I'm really feeling like good about myself, coming back to the pride thing. And then the long guys come by, and I have a really big, ferocious sounding dog, and they like to tease my dog with the blower on the other side of the slider, and I close the blinds when I know he's there, so he's doing this one time. My dog's like, back and forth, wrecking the blinds. My husband gets so mad. So I open the blinds. I finish having this conversation with my daughter. This happens. And then I open the blinds and I say to the lawn guy through the sliding glass door, I was like, oh, you want to tease my dog? And I unlock the door and I go to let the dog out. He flies through my lawn, jumps over the fence, and then I turn back around feeling very good about myself, right? Because he was teasing my dog and causing problems or breaking my blinds. I turn back around, my daughter on my couch says, well, Mom, was that really the nicest thing to do? And I was like, I'm such a sinner. That's what I said. But then I was like, no, Kate. And I wanted you to know, I said in that moment, I was like, thank you, because I want you to know that, like, we're never done trying. Right. We're never done trying to be better. And I feel like if they were in school, they wouldn't see those little moments. They get to see these moments and the good ones too.
Right.
One time we were at the dollar store and this little kid was shoplifting. And I could tell he was about to shoplift because I may or may not have shoplifted when I was younger. So I know what to look for. So I saw him about to shoplift and I kind of caught eyes with him and I called him over and then I just paid for what he was going to steal. And then I just kind of said a couple nice things to him and then sent him on his way. Now all that happened just between me and the kid. Well, one of my kids was watching and she said to me later, she asked what happened and I kind of explained it to her. She said, I want to do things like that. Well, she would have missed that. That was in the middle of the day. Right. So there's all these little things they're learning from you. Well, actually, they're learning it from someone.
Right. Oh yeah, for sure.
Right. They're learning all day long. They are watching. And I guess I would rather them be watching who I choose for them to watch.
Right.
Is one of my big things.
Right.
Now I'm like extra sweaty in my armpits. Carry on. I'm going to drink my water, but I can't lift my arms.
We talked about some great reasons. Another reason that I thought about was, our children have the ability to really excel in sports or music, into dance.
Yes.
And it doesn't have to divide into either they can do that or they get a family or they get an education.
Right.
We have that time.
So much time.
Yes, that they can do all of that and they can excel in all of it.
Right. Your kids are very musical.
Yes.
And you guys have meals together 3 times a day.
We do. We really do.
And they have the time to.
We do.
So many meals. So many. But they have the time to practice their music and practice their singing. Yes. And they don't have to be out till 10 o'clock at night doing it.
Right. They don't have to be, or they don't have to decide that, their schoolwork got put off and now they can't finish it, or they have so much homework, that we're able to, and like you said with time management, I'm able to help them with that time management, but, to be really, really involved, to know exactly what they need to do and what they need to get done, but also to just have blocks of free time.
Blocks of free time.
Yes.
And they do the coolest things. You know, I'm sure everybody sees it in summertime, but when you give kids blocks of free time and just let them be bored, I mean, they come up with some amazing things. Sometimes I sacrifice school because I'm like, well, I don't want to stop what's going on.
It's so true. That was another reason why I was going to say we homeschool. So that when the kids are playing together nicely and the boys are sitting there doing Legos, that I don't have to be like, time to go to school.
Or I have to do homework or something, right? Because they come up with some genius things.
They really do.
And it just takes so much time to even get bored enough to get there.
Yes.
You know, to do that.
A huge reason why I started homeschooling. A huge reason why I started. There was a homeschool family in my neighborhood, and they were leading a support group at the time, and I went.
Like a homeschool support group?
Yes.
Okay.
Homeschool support group. My daughter was still in preschool at the time.
Okay.
My oldest. So I didn't really have any homeschoolers, but I was trying to meet new people and kind of see what was going on. And but their kids were just so sweet to each other.
Oh, yes. The siblings.
The siblings were such good friends. And I just saw that and I was like, that's what I want. At the time I had 3. So like, that's what I want them to be. I want them to be good friends. And I know with my own siblings, first of all, they were a lot older than me. Right. So there was just that different thing.
She was the oops baby.
I was totally planned and wanted and prayed for. Yes. But even just seeing other families growing up that were going to school, and knowing myself who I was in school, I really only had friends that were in my exact grade. I didn't even have friends that were in like slightly different grades, let alone having friends with people that were vastly older or younger. That's another thing that with my children, like they were able to spend so much time with their grandparents, and all four of their great grandparents were alive.
Wow.
You know, they've all now since passed away, but they all had a relationship with a certain amount with all of them. So, and we were able to go during the day and spend time there. With, you know, if somebody wanted us to go to lunch, I remember going out to lunch with great grandma, things like that. So,
and I think that when I grew up with, I have an older brother and older sister, and my sister and I weren't really friends until I was in college, maybe even a little after, as far as just besides siblings. And then my brother and I were really close because we were just under 2 years apart. But there is different. You do see in homeschool families the siblings. I don't know if it's out of desperation because you're like, well, that's all you have to play with today, so figure it out, or that they just have the time to fight, make up, do it again, fight, make up, do it again. They really have a lot of time together. But there is a beautiful, you know, I always say you're just going to love when a mom calls me to check out our homeschool group or something. I go, you're going to love how your family runs eventually. Yes. You know, my kids do a lot of chores around the house because I'm always like, I need your help. Like 5 of us live here. Like, I need your help. Whereas if they were in school, maybe I would get that done. And I have a housekeeper, but it's still, I need your help. There's just, you know, and they get that.
Yes.
I actually don't have to fight them to do it because they see me all day long. They see what it takes, and they understand that, like, we all made this, you know, we all have to clean it up. We all have to do the laundry. I think too, the individual needs of each child, I could see that my second one would never fit the school box. And I thought, of course, I thought she was amazing, right? Who doesn't? Right. So, you know, she was a late reader. She is amazing. And she was a late reader. And I thought, I don't want to put her anywhere where they tell her that that's not what's great about her, you know? And I love that I have that under my control. Yes. You know, who their mind is. You know, I read some Earl Nightingale, and he said a lot of our adulthood sometimes is spent undoing some of the thoughts that were put into our head in school, the false thoughts.
I completely see this. So my husband's a music teacher. He teaches choir at church as well. And sometimes we'll get somebody singing in the congregation or whatever, and he'll invite them to choir. And they'll say something like this. They'll be in their 50s maybe. And they'll say, no, my first grade teacher told me I couldn't sing. Wow. And that's it.
And that was it.
That was it. They will not sing from that point on. Gosh. And my husband will always be like, that is not true. Everybody can sing. Now, I don't necessarily agree with him.
Right, because I keep trying to get in all the choirs, and no one, he's like, everyone can sing except Cindy.
Some people, you know, have more intonation issues than others.
I send him my audio tracks. I text them to him. I'm like, just listen to it. And he's a really, really nice guy. He's like, you know, I just don't think you have, you know, and I'm like, oh, try again.
You can just auto-tune now.
But one comment from first grade.
Yes. And it's
40 years later.
And if that was one person, but no, it's several people.
Right.
There's over and over again that we'll hear that. Or a kid was told that they weren't good at math.
Yes. Oh, this is a really common
And then
one.
they hate math,
they hate math. And I found that no kid isn't good at math.
Right.
I found that sometimes you try to keep them on too advanced for them for too many years, and then they're just like, they're like, I'm not good at math. But, you know,
or the opposite, or you're not challenging them enough, and it's boring.
Right. Because math is like reading. It's not like, you know, every grade has a certain math level. They have to do that in school, guys. I mean, what else are they going to do in a group situation? But when you're at home, you don't do that. This is what's challenging for you. And yeah, so I find that you know, it still happens. My kids are still out and about. We do a lot of things. They still hear things and get told things I don't necessarily want. But I am the loudest, strongest voice in their life.
Mm-hmm.
And I had a great therapist. You can PM me if you ever want his name. I believe he does Skype calls. And he said, whatever you hear, the loudest, strongest, and most often is what you're going to believe.
Yes.
And my husband and I are that voice in our children's life.
Right.
We are what they hear loudest, most often, strongest.
Mm-hmm.
So the other voices in their world are just background noise.
Right.
And I think that sometimes if you're in school and then an after school program or you're doing dance or something and then your whole day is spent, unfortunately the parents aren't the loudest, strongest voice heard in their children's life.
And we think they can be, right?
Oh, yeah.
But they have to make maybe more of an effort.
Intentional, absolutely.
Intentional. And that's the thing that I wanted to say too. So all of this, like I said before, we never chose homeschooling out of fear of another type of...
Right.
You didn't either. Well, you tried other types of... So you weren't afraid of them,
very
right?
Open to it.
And another reason why we do it is not because while I do think that I'm giving them an excellent education, and one of the things that we talk about is even though I have 7 kids, it's still, a 1 on 7 at the most ratio.
Right.
But usually it's 1-on-1 because I'll help 1 kid or maybe 2 are at the same level and I'll be doing it with the 2 of them. So it's not to take away from teachers and what they're doing because I would not want a class of 35 kindergartners.
No, gosh.
I would not want that from 8 to 2.
God bless you, kindergarten teachers.
Yes, you're amazing. And elementary school teachers. And as much as they've been giving to Zoom and what they've been doing,
I know.
It's been amazing.
I know.
So it's always that I can give my kids a great education, just like you said, because I know them personally.
Yes.
I can tailor the levels that I want to be for them. I can give them that 1-on-1 or 1-on-2 or 1-on-3 tutoring that people would pay a lot of money for.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Oh, speaking of tutoring moms, I go to the library at night sometimes, and I'm seeing elementary age kids there filling our libraries with tutors.
Yes. I've seen that.
You can do this.
Oh, you can.
You do not need, I mean, if you have to because you're at work and you need help, that's one thing. But if you're doing that and you're paying for tutors for your elementary age kids because you think you aren't capable, I'm here to tell you that is wrong. I have listened, I've eavesdropped on these things. They're doing everything you can do. Okay.
They really are.
They really, really are. So like I said, if you're doing it because you have to work or you have other obligations and you need someone to step in, great. I do that too. But if you're doing it because you don't think you're capable, you are capable.
Well, here's another, that brings up a great point. And I know we're going to wrap up here. We're getting long-winded.
Yeah, because I have to lift my arms at some point.
But what we're talking about too, so maybe some of those moms aren't doing it because of character. Because their children won't sit with them and do it nicely.
Okay. Well, how do you circumvent that?
Well, what I'm saying is that's actually a great benefit of homeschooling, is that you get to deal with your children's character. Because if you're taking them and putting them in school because you can't deal, because you're not getting along and you don't have a great relationship, you're really just avoiding that. I don't know what your therapist would say, but you're really just avoiding that conflict instead of going ahead and saying, like,
handling it.
Yes, let's get to the heart of this conflict. There's a heart somewhere.
There is a heart.
Right? Let's get to the heart of this. Let's sort out the heart of this character issue, and then let's move forward. So some moms will say things, we've had moms before that have said, like, my kid just cannot sit and write for 10 minutes at a time. It's like, unless there's like a super physical problem, yes, your kid can sit and write for 10 minutes at a time.
So if you can't do that with them or you haven't taught them that discipline, then start at 2 minutes, start at 3 minutes, but don't give up.
Right.
Because you can. And I love that because I didn't think about that. I naturally would be a more disciplined person. My father was in the military, so I don't struggle necessarily with that. But you're right. You get to deal with the heart.
Right.
So I have one kid that doesn't easily want to do math and flops around like a dead fish on the floor when it's time to do math. And I consider that a character issue. Yes. So when she's doing that, I'm like, this is not how we behave when we have something we don't want to do. So teaching them to do things they don't want to do on a regular basis will prepare them for life.
It will.
Because
it's a huge part of homeschooling. And
it's a huge
honestly a huge benefit of homeschooling.
Yes. And so you're right. You have insight into that character. You're in the car, when my kids hit each other to do something, I'm like, I don't like your heart with that. So we're going to address that. You're there for every conversation. You're molding. I always say I feel like they came to me as Play-Doh. Right? The color, the jar, everything. I can't change it. Right. I can't turn the red Play-Doh this. I can't do that. I can't add more Play-Doh. I just got the jar of Play-Doh with each kid. But I can help shape it. Yes. Right? I can take what they were, what God made them, and kind of mold it this way.
And hopefully to what God was planning on them to be.
Well, you're going prayerfully into it.
Exactly. And I think that what you were saying too, like we get to deal with those character, and also we're the best person to do that because we love them. As much as they're teachers might like them and love them,
It's not the same.
it's not the same.
No.
We love them forever.
Forever. And we want the best for them as adults.
Yes.
And sometimes, if you're outsourcing too much, you can see they want what's best for them right now.
Right.
But I would rather have a failed grade and a learned lesson with my children. I'd rather them avoid a hardship later and have one now. And I think that you get that opportunity in homeschool frequently.
Yeah, you do.
Say, this little thing going on right now, I don't care what it turns out in school, but you're going to suffer as an adult if we don't address this.
Yes, and you get that opportunity to do
You
that
do.
almost daily.
Hourly.
Hourly.
Yeah. Sometimes you need a break from it.
Huge blessing.
Yeah,
It's
so great.
huge blessing.
Everyone homeschool. Okay, so I think if I were to wrap up, why homeschool? I would say, one, everyone except that we are all homeschoolers. Take back your child's education.
Passionately. Yes.
Whether you want to spend $30,000 a year a kid or no public school, homeschool, be a hybrid homeschooler, you are ultimately responsible for their education. You and your husband together. Take that back.
Take it back.
That would be mine. And then why homeschool as far as not traditional school? The reasons are endless. And my main one would be the value it brings to the family unit. That would be my biggest thing, is what my family gets to be like the majority of the time. It's not as separated.
Yes.
Your main, why homeschool?
Well, I think I would agree. I think that it just fits our family. So to say different ones, since you stole that from me. Also, just that quality education that we can give them.
Oh, yeah.
We give them this huge quality education for a fraction of the cost, or sometimes no cost.
Mm-hmm.
And
Because you're basically getting private tutors your whole education.
you really are.
Yes. Oh, so before we finish, I have to tell one more story. So someone a couple months ago was asking me how my kids are doing in math. Everyone wants to know about math.
Yeah.
Or
if they're reading. Sometimes
if
I'll
they're
ask
reading
them,
when
yes.
they're younger. But I don't know if I ever told you this, but I was so obnoxious before I homeschooled. So I
No,
met.
you did tell me this, and it's super obnoxious.
No, wait, about Lindy?
Yes.
Okay. So her daughter must have been 8 at the time, 7 or 8, and I knew she homeschooled. Her kids occasionally didn't wear shoes, and I was super judgy. So I used to catch her 7 or 8-year-old in the hallway alone in church and quiz her on math drills. How obnoxious is that? I used to be like, "What's 8 times 8?" Thinking and she always got them right, because now I know they're just a very diligent family. So back to my other story. People always want to know about math. So someone asked me recently, well, how are they doing in math? And I really didn't understand the question. I was like, what do you mean? And they're like, well, how are they doing? How are their grades in math? And I was like, well, we don't do grades. What do you mean? And they're like, well, how do they do? And I'm like, well, they do it. What do you mean? And they're like, well, don't you have tests? And I go, yeah, I guess there's tests in the curriculum. Well, how do they score? Well, they get 100. And they're like, well, what do you mean? I go, because you don't stop when you get a 70. If they get answers wrong on the math test that I give them without their book, then it's go back and get them right. And I think in school, you have to move on. That's just the nature of a group of people.
Yes.
But in homeschool world, you don't move on until you've mastered the information.
Right.
There's no can you imagine anywhere in the world if you're oh, well, I got only 70% of this right, so forget about the 30% I don't know and move on. I don't want my
doctors.
Yeah, I don't want my doctor being I know 70% about babies and giving birth. That other 30% was iffy, but I just went right on to neurology, and it wouldn't be good enough. And that doesn't happen in a homeschool world.
No.
So that's why when people are are there grades? No, because did you learn all the information you set out to learn? And until you do that, you're not done.
Right. You haven't mastered it.
You haven't mastered it.
We're just doing it until you master it.
Until you master it.
Yeah. So I think when I made my child's high school transcript, people were like, how did she get all A's? And I was like, well, she didn't really have a choice.
Right. What do you mean? We weren't oh, you got a C and yay.
Okay, so obviously you don't understand it, but let's go to the next lesson.
Right. And I completely understand why schools have to do this.
Oh, yes.
But this is where I implore you, back to the passionate armpit sweating thing. This is why I implore you, if your kid got a 70 on a math test, go home and help them with the 30% they didn't understand.
Right.
Because that teacher cannot do that. They do not have the time to help every student in their class master the other 20 to 30% of the information the student did get. That's on you.
Yes.
Okay, so in homeschool world, fortunately, that's just what it is. Until you got, I might let one slide with a 1 wrong on a math test, but other than that, no, we're just going to learn the information.
Or if they got it wrong and you understand why they got it wrong, and they understand why they got it wrong.
They didn't do the whole backside. Sometimes that happens.
Exactly. So, there's just different reasons, but the whole reason why we're doing it is not so that they get A+ on everything.
Right.
It's so that they understand
how to master something.
Yes.
How to want to learn something, need to learn something, acquire information, until you've mastered it.
Yes,
That's a
if you're
life
going to
skill.
learn addition and subtraction and then move into multiplication and division, if you don't really understand addition and subtraction,
You're not moving on.
you're not moving on.
You're not moving on.
So that's a benefit, there we go, of
Yes.
homeschooling, that you can sit in a subject until your child understands
Right.
it.
And they don't know any different. They
No.
don't know they should be on this.
And
or
it's
that.
not that their children are not, as much as we think as parents that we believe this, they're really not inherently lazy. There's
No.
not one child, I think, that's going to sit in addition until they're 18
No.
just because they never wanted to do more.
I find the opposite. I feel like they're inherently like driven to learn.
They are.
Yeah, they're
and you
driven
can't.
to learn.
One of the things that I learned from, and we love to talk about Andy.
Andy.
Oh my, I love Andy. But one of the things that he taught me as an early homeschooler was that you can't help children too much.
Mm.
And he said, because think of it this way: you're trying to teach your children to tie their shoes. Eventually, they stop letting you help, and they're like, I can do it myself.
They do, yeah. you're right.
Yes,
They get adamant.
everything.
Yep.
Pulling up their underwear, and sometimes you're in a hurry, and you're like, just let
Let me
me
just
pull
do
it up.
it.
You know,
Yes.
buckling their seatbelts, all
Oh
of
my
that
gosh,
stuff.
the buckling the seatbelts.
Right? That eventually they get to a point where they're like, I can do it
I
myself.
can do it.
They do the same thing with school.
Mm.
They really do. So that helped me as a homeschooler be like, oh, I can't help too much. So if I'm saying to you 2 + 3 and I'm holding up fingers and helping you figure out what those mean, it's
Right.
okay.
It's okay.
Right? And then eventually they'll be like, Mom, you don't have to hold up 5 fingers.
Right, I get it.
I get
And I
it.
think colleges are freaking out over homeschoolers nowadays for this reason. Is these homeschoolers that are college bound they know how to master information.
Right.
So it doesn't matter if you didn't get to it all in homeschooling. What you gave them was the skill
Of being able to master something.
of being able to master something, which
Yes.
is going to carry them through. And colleges
Yes.
are fighting over homeschoolers now.
They really are.
Because if a college-bound homeschooler knows how to do this, and by the time they get to college, they know how to do it on their own.
Right.
Right.
They
Because-
definitely should.
I mean, should. If you put that time in, then they know
Yes.
how to do this. We love homeschooling.
We do. Okay, we went long-winded
Yeah.
today. Hope
Sorry.
you guys had fun.
Super
We love
passionate.
you.